Hello, welcome to Technology Simplified. Today we're filming on location at Improving Enterprises.
We're here today at Improving Enterprises to talk with Barry Rogers and Ken Howard about their new book on Agile development. Agile development is a new development methodology and software, and it's gaining a lot more traction and momentum in corporate America. We want to find out a little bit more about what it is and who's using it today.
I'm Lindsay Darnell with WireVibe, and this is Barry Rogers and Ken Howard. And can you guys tell us what you do here?
Sure. So I'm Barry Rogers. I'm president of Improving Enterprises Texas Division. And even though I'm president, which means I oversee sales, recruiting, and delivery, I'm also quite hands-on in the Agile community. So I'll play roles as Agile instructor, Scrum Master, and coach. Ken?
And I'm Ken Howard. I'm Vice President of Professional Services here at Improving Enterprises. And I also work in the field, so I manage all the consultants and I work out on some of our strategic assignments. And Agile adoption is one of the more prevalent activities that we're doing out in the field today. So it's very related to the content of the book.
Ken, tell me a little bit about what Improving does overall. I mean, what are your consulting services offer and what are you targeting today?
Oh, sure. Well, Improving Enterprises' primary expertise is software development. And we work with companies that build and maintain custom software. So we work in all technologies. You may have heard terms like .NET and Java, which are just a couple of the key technologies out there today. But those are just tools that are used to build software. The processes and practices that in building software effectively and building the right software is really what Agile is all about. So Agile really finds its way into all of our engagements in some way, shape, or form, regardless of the technology.
So Barry, do you see the use of Agile development increasing?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, there's statistics in the industry that talk about the increase of Agile adoption. Of course, 75.8% of statistics are made up on the fly. But what we've actually seen in the industry is a continually increase in Agile. Agile has been around, as you probably know, since 2001. So it's been around for 10 years, but it's still an extremely hot topic, and we see more and more clients continually adopting Agile techniques. At different levels. So in some cases we see kind of a grassroots, we need help on a project, we're trying out Agile. We have other clients that do full-blown enterprise Agile adoption, where we'll come in and help the enterprise adopt Agile.
So really they're bringing you in, Barry, to say, okay, we've got a company, we're doing this, we've heard this Agile development process exists. Can you guys come in as the experts and teach our teams how to use this development methodology and how to use it in the projects we're trying to get implemented today? Yeah,
we typically have two types of clients. One is what you just described, where they recognize, there's this new Agile thing, they're trying to learn, they're trying to succeed in it, and they recognize that both training and coaching will help them along the way. We have a number of clients that have tried Agile in the past, and even in some cases we go in and they say Agile is a bad word. That's not an uncommon occurrence, where they'll even say we can't use the word Agile, we need to use nimble or some other term. And they recognize that the reason why it didn't work is they really didn't apply it correctly because they didn't have the expertise. So they'll call on us, and a typical engagement for us will start with a quick 2-day immersion type of program. We'll immerse them in Agile. We'll teach them Agile values, principles, we'll focus on Scrum. Then on day 3, we'll actually help them build what's called a product backlog, which is basically their prioritized list of requirements. And then we'll just help them with the first sprint iteration and help them through the whole process of Scrum and what Agile means.
What are the issues you guys are seeing, Ken? I mean, what are those issues about the CIO? What was this concern about going to Agile?
It's all about psychology and emotional baggage with regard to fear of trying something new. A lot of the PMI PMI's been around since 1969, and a lot of the practices that they not only taught but certified people on were practices that were really born out of the construction industry. Like, for example, the Gantt chart is an example of a tool that project managers have used for years. Well, the Gantt chart was originally developed in the early 1900s to help with the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is a very serial project, meaning you can't put the spans up until you have the base poured, and everything has to be done in a very specific order, and you have to know exactly what you're going to do before you start. But building a bridge is not really a creative activity. And software development is usually a creative activity. There's a lot of choices that can be made along the way, and a lot of change happens in a business while a project is underway that causes you to have to change direction a bit and introduce new requirements. Well, you couldn't do that with a building or a bridge. You can't decide after you built a 20-story building to add another 10 stories on top of it because you just thought of it. But with regard to software, you have that creative control. And so software developers for many, many years built software using construction industry practices, even though they weren't necessarily the most appropriate way of building software.
20% of requirements meet 80% of your needs.
Yeah.
Right. So with big upfront documentation, you're spending lots of time writing unnecessary requirements, and in a lot of cases, the end user, the business, they don't know all the requirements they need until after they see the system being built. Okay, so what will happen is we'll create this backlog of requirements. We'll take the highest priority requirements to the business. We'll make those a little bit finer grain, and we'll start developing those in 2-week increments, right? So as the end user sees the system being built, yeah, they may have change in requirements. They may see this, think of a requirement that they didn't think of before. They may see a component being built that they want built differently, but that's a good thing. So on a waterfall project, in contrast, you would wait till the end, right, after you've done all this requirements analysis, after you've built all this software, bring it to the end user, realize that this really isn't what we need, and at that point there's no time to change, right? So then by definition, you go over budget, you go over schedule in order to meet the needs of the user. So in contrast with an Agile project, yes, you might change more frequently, but that's a good thing. That means you're honing in on your solution sooner. Right? And if you get to that critical milestone where you need to get into production, you could take those lower priorities that is in that bottom, 80% that's really not needed, and put those out into a later release, right? So you can hone in sooner. So change is actually good. Agile is all about embracing change and recognize that changes in requirements are what's needed, and you realize that sooner.
Okay, so where does a Scrum Master fit into all of this, and what is their role?
Okay, so on a Scrum project, there's really only 3 roles. There's a Scrum Master, a Product Owner, and then the team. So at the team level, we don't distinguish between a QA, BA, developer. They're the team because the team's committing to what they're going to get done within each iteration or a sprint. So the Scrum Master is really what's known as the servant leader for the team. So you could say it's equivalent to a project manager on a traditional project, but a Scrum Master is an Agile project manager. So what a Scrum Master does is they're first of all the master of Scrum, so they make sure that Scrum itself is followed. But most importantly, they're a servant leader. So they're leading the team, they're removing blocks from the team, they're hiding the team from any noise, external noise, and they're facilitating the success of the team. So that would be in contrast with, on a traditional project, if you have a project manager, if the project manager is what I would consider to be a good leader and a servant leader, they're the same. If they're a command and control leader and they're telling the team what they're going to produce within each increment, how they're going to do work, that would be the opposite of a Scrum Master, the opposite of a servant leader.
So I know you guys authored a book and called Individuals, Interactions, and Agile Guide. So tell me a little bit about what prompted you guys to collaborate and write that book.
Okay. Would you want me to take it?
I'll start.
Okay.
So, when Agile first came to be in its present form, there was a group of experts in our field who came together, and they produced this manifesto called the Agile Manifesto, which has several values and several principles. And the first value in the Agile Manifesto says we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And what was ironic to Barry and I, we do a lot of presentations together to groups, and we talk with groups and folks that we were consulting with. When we asked them about Agile and what Agile means to them, everybody would talk about Scrum and stand-up meetings and burn-down charts and graphs and all of the things that are the mechanics of Agile, but nobody was talking about individuals and interactions. And in reality, a creative activity like software development requires that there be a lot of communication. And we became interested in exploring that more, and that a lot of our background came not so much with teaching the mechanics to people, but helping people behave in a manner that led to productive working teams. So we started to formulate some of our ideas, and we found that it resonated with our audiences. So we collaborated and built a book on that topic. It's actually a topic that a lot of people find interesting because you're talking about sociology and psychology and human interaction. And we also found a couple ironies as well, because one of the big ironies is a lot of people who are attracted to the engineering discipline tend to be more introverted. They tend to not be as comfortable interacting with other people. They want to be in their computer, working on their code, or writing their requirements, or whatever it is that they do. And to do an effective job of building software, you need to get out of your cube and interact with people. So it's really pushing people outside their comfort zone. So helping people understand why they're challenged so much in interacting with others. We explored that quite a bit in the book and give a lot of tips and guidance on how to overcome that.
So the day that we actually came up with the idea for the book, Ken and I were both consulting at a company, and we were talking about some of the challenges. And all the challenges had to do with human dynamics, communication issues, organizational dysfunction. And we started talking about this value, individuals and interactions, that is probably the least of the four values that get recognition within the industry, right? We recognize the void, and so we decided to pursue this and address it in the book. I think the reason why it's not as prevalent in the industry is it has more to do with psychology, right? So most of us have come up in the world majoring in things like computer science or software engineering and kind of the exact science and analytical nature of building software, right? This has to do with more of the imperfect science, how humans behave, psychology, and things like that. So what we've noticed, we've talked to a lot of different groups, and we asked them, what are your biggest challenges? And everybody that we've talked to agree that even though technical challenges are out there, that the biggest challenges and the hardest ones to overcome have to do with challenges around communication, around people, around organizations, and how you change.
One of the editors from Madison Wesley actually approached us. He saw that we were on the docket to speak at an Agile conference up in Chicago a few years ago, and he saw that our topic was so different than everything else he'd ever seen in the field, and he realized, there have been hundreds of books written on Agile, but nobody had ever written a book on the human side of Agile. So this was a prime opportunity, and it was great timing as well to have him bump up against us and give us the opportunity to write the book for them.
Well, it sounds like, in basically kind of gleaning what Barry said earlier about the Scrum Master's job to protect the team from, that I assume that extends to the organization that they're in, right? And those organizational dynamics, and how do you really deal with that? Because when you're talking large customers and big organizations, not everybody agrees. There's a lot of internal organizational politics that affect the actual day-to-day work. And how does that play out with the Scrum Master and trying to manage the organization?
I think that's one of the biggest challenges, because Agile, more than anything else, is about a culture. And when I say a culture, it's a culture of respect, transparency, trust, this concept of self-organizing teams, right? So you empower the team, you trust the team, you allow them to self-organize, and then they're going to be the most powerful team. And so what we've seen some organizations say, we want to adopt Agile. And they think Agile is just a way of developing software quicker, right? And sometimes it's against the culture of the organization, right? So there could be organizations where naturally it might be a distrusting or one that doesn't have a lot of empowerment. And that makes it the most challenging, because that is what Agile is all about. It's a culture built around this. And so in some cases the team has that culture, some cases they don't. Sometimes they do, and the organization as a whole doesn't. So the Scrum Master has that challenge to make sure that those sets of values and principles come across not only within the team, but if there's any external factors coming against it, then they have to basically coach the rest of the organization and or shield the team from that noise.
It's not unusual for a CIO to say, okay, we want y'all to do Agile, but just go do it and don't bother me with it. And he may not say that out loud, but that's generally the attitude. Just go about your business and do this Agile thing, whatever it is. In reality, if you don't have top-down support, because if his management team is still asking for these plans that go out for 18 months with a great level of detail and that all requirements be written before you start building software, then the team can't be Agile. if the business side is not engaging with the team and making daily decisions on what the priorities are of what they should be building, and if they're building the right things, and if they're building them in the manner that they want them built, then the team's in a quandary because they have to guess what the needs are of the business, and there's a high probability they're going to build the wrong thing. So you have to have that support on the business side and top-down support. It can't just happen out in the project teams.
What are some tool sets that you use to help with the Agile process and development you found?
Can you take that? You want to take that?
Yeah, you want to talk about the disc?
Okay. So there's different types of tools. Okay, so some of the tools and the most common tools people talk about are tools that help with the Scrum process. So those are things like burn downs, and you can maintain your product backlog, your user stories, see how you're doing. So those are very traditional, if I can use that word with Agile, traditional Scrum tools. Some of the tools that Ken and I talk about have more to do with tools with human dynamics and human interaction. So one of the tools that Ken and I both are proponents of is known as the DISC. And DISC has been around for a long time, and it talks about kind of human dynamics. Everybody has a natural makeup of D, I, S, and C elements. So D is more of your dominant element, I is more of your communicative element, I's are generally optimists, S are more of your team players, and C are more of your critical thinkers. So in our industry, computer science, we have more C's than anything, right? We have people that have studied computer science and they're into the details. You know, they're more perfectionists, that sort of thing. D's are more your drivers, so a lot of CEOs or maybe even project managers will be D's. I's make the team fun, S's are supportive. So everybody's different. And the point of this is, you might think, well, if C's are perfectionists, and the concept behind DISC is C's get along real well, S's get along, I's get along, but when you mix and match, you get conflict, right? So why not just get a team of all C's? Well, obviously, if everybody's a C, things are going to go slower, right? Nobody's going to be there driving the team to success. So you need the D versus the C. You need the I's, you need the S's. So the main thing this teaches is the best teams have a blend, but then the best teams have conflict. So conflict is good. Embrace the fact that you have conflict, because that means you have diversification. That means you have your drivers, your critical thinkers, your optimists, your supportive, and recognize this and embrace it. And what you can do with the DISC is we plot an entire team on a wheel, and we can see who's naturally going to get along, who's naturally going to conflict, and why. So with everybody knowing this, right, then you can know who you're going to conflict with. And one of the things, now I feel like one of the things we talk about is known as the language of DISC. Okay. And so we'll train a team on DISC, we'll plot them on this wheel, and then you'll be in a conversation, and let's say you have a D and a C, and the C is getting into all these gory details and annoying the D, or the D is trying to drive the C to a bottom line, and so there's natural tension and conflict. The D might say to the C, hey, you're being a bit of a C, can you get to the point? Or the C might say, you know, you're being too much of a D. And generally people laugh, like you just did. Right. So you can use it as an icebreaker, yeah, right? And it really helps people bond, people get over this natural tension and get along.
People are surprised when we say you want conflict, but you want to manage the conflict effectively, because a lot of people naturally want to avoid conflict. They don't want to be involved in situations with conflict. So we actually have a series of exercises in the second half of our book, workshops that you can conduct with your teams. One of them is the Moon Survival exercise. And the way Moon Survival works is you're given a scenario where you've crashed on the moon and you need to be able to survive. You need to prioritize this list of items in terms of its importance to your survival. So you answer the questions and you come up with a list on your own, and then we put you together in a team of 4 or 5 people and you come up with a list that the team can all agree to. Well, that is fraught with conflict, because some people will say that you must have this, other people would say, you know, the match, is a match important? Somebody might realize, you know, the match is useless in outer space, and somebody else might say, but it's important for this thing, other than lighting a fire. So you have these discussions and a lot of conflict ensues, but the interesting thing about the exercise is the group score is always better than the scores of all the individuals on the team. And it's an interesting discovery, and it just demonstrates the fact that you want to cultivate that conflict and have those interactions and those disagreements, and that will come up with a better result. So one of the things a Scrum Master needs to do is facilitate to make sure that the proper interactions are happening, and people aren't hiding in their caves during the day working on their project assignments, but they're getting out of their desks and having those interactions and cultivating results that are going to be better than any individual could come up with.
Awesome. And that really kind of ties back into the human component that you're talking about, is that there's this human underlying component within. It's not just a methodology, but then you have this underlying component of human interaction that actually affects project dates and things like that in organizations that you have to be aware of as well.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about tools, it's not tools as you typically think about, like Microsoft Project and things, mechanics tools. The tools that we've introduced they're grayer, because they're tools that a leader can use to help cultivate a high-performing team. And how you utilize that and what you do with the results of these exercises is really a matter of a good leader knowing how to form a good team. And if you discover you have a team full of Ds or a team of all Cs and no Ds, then you're going to realize that you have some issues there, and you may have to make some organizational changes and shuffle things around so that you have a higher performing team.
How do you classify people as the D's or C's? Do you do a test? Is it something you have written?
Well, there's actually a number of assessments in the industry that you can take. Ken and I created an assessment that we provided at the appendix of the book that you can use. But there's some instruments out in the industry that'll do a lot more than just our assessment in the book. For example, the wheel that I talked about, you can take the assessment, and not only will it give the DISC graph, it'll give a full textual description, which is amazingly accurate, and it also will help plot a team on the wheel. So you can use one of these instruments, learn what everybody's DISC is, and then see where they are plotted against one another. I think that's highly valuable, so I would suggest not just taking the DISC and not just understanding the DISC, but moving forward with a full-blown assessment that'll give you the wheel, give you the textual description. It'll talk about everybody's strengths and weaknesses and how to best communicate.
So talk a little bit about training. You guys offer training and training courses. How does that tie into doing to your services? I mean, what does a training kind of provide for people?
So we provide several different types of training. We provide technology training on things like C# or Java, but to hone it in on this specific interview and discussion, we do a lot of Agile training. So Agile training can take multiple forms. We have one class that we call the ASI, Agile Scrum Immersion, and it's a really cool class because we'll take the class through a simulated Scrum environment. So not only do we teach the values and principles of Agile and the mechanics of Scrum, but we have exercises where the team will get immersed and we'll go through a sprint and daily stand-ups. And we don't use software, we use, I won't give away all the details, but we do kind of a fun exercise where they get the concepts and the roles and how it's supposed to work. So that's one. So we have a program called the AMP, the Agile Mentorship Program.
Okay.
And so what that's about is we'll take a team through the 2-day Agile Scrum Immersion class. Then the third day we'll actually build their product backlog with them. And then we'll go through 3 sprints, where the first sprint we're actually playing that critical Scrum Master role. In the second sprint we're co-playing it with a Scrum Master from the client. In the third sprint we're observing and we're giving them feedback, letting them be autonomous and take that role. And then periodically throughout the program they'll rely on us less and less until at the end we're just doing a checkpoint. Then at the end of the program, we typically offer another class of ours, which is a certified Agile class. So there's an organization called the Scrum.org, and the program was written by Ken Schwaber, which is one of the founders of Scrum, and the organization allows an actual certification. So it's less about Agile and more about Scrum, and gets into all the detailed mechanics where you need some expertise before taking that class, but coming out of it, you take a test and then you can get a certification. So within the AMP program, we'll start with the ASI, immerse them into Agile, build their backlog, coach them, and then give them the formalized Scrum training at the end.
Well, and that's a really good point, because part of being in a large organization, all the time you have people coming and going in teams, and projects kind of may have certain components of teams, but those are constantly changing. How do you deal with that constant shift in plugging people in and out and changing those teams every project?
It's getting senior management more plugged into the actual people and where the actual productive work is happening, because if you're just looking at people as resources and numbers and you're not looking at their behavioral profiles, and you're not looking at which teams are high performing, which ones are at and performing well together, then you're just talking numbers, and you may achieve some numbers goal, but you're not going to achieve your value, your business value, and that's really what we're there for, is to provide business value.
You know, all teams go through the forming, norming, storming, performing
Right.
stages. You probably heard of the Tuckman model, and we mentioned that within the book. So once you get a team through that model, and some of the tools we have, such as the DISC, will bring you through that model quicker, and you have a high-performing team, you don't want to change the team. One of the terms within Agile and Scrum is called velocity, right? And at first, you don't know what the velocity of a brand new team is, right? So the velocity is how much can that team get done in a given sprint. So you find out what the velocity is after the first sprint. It may change, they may get a little quicker after the second. Usually within the third or the fourth, you have a rhythm going, you know that velocity. That's when the team's very powerful. They've reached that stage where they're high performing, you know the velocity, and then you can get a lot of consistency. Now when requirements changes and new requirements come in, you can estimate those requirements, base it on that particular team's velocity, and get a fairly accurate feel for how long it's going to take. Right? A brand new team will have a completely different velocity. So that's another mistake that some high-level managers will do, is they'll compare velocity of one team versus another, and that's really meaningless, because how the two teams size their backlog may be different, and the velocity of the team may be different. You may have one team with senior individuals that'll perform at a higher velocity than junior, but maybe they cost more. Which one's better? Well, it depends, right? So you can't really compare velocity from one team to another, and as you break up teams, you destroy that velocity in the team dynamic.
One of the things you have with a high-performing team is they tend to be really in tune with each other from a communication standpoint. And a lot of communication is not the prepared communication like this, where we're talking about a very specific topic and we know what we're going to talk about. But there's a lot of casual communication that occurs in the team room that could impact somebody else in the team. So just overhearing things could affect somebody's choices about what they're working on that day, or cause somebody to have a light bulb come on and solve a problem that they hadn't thought of otherwise. So a big challenge that teams are faced with is distributed teams. When they're geographically separated, you'll have teams where part of the team's offshore, part of the team is in another building, and a lot of work is occurring by email. The delays that occur with that type of communication can really slow things down. Plus, it doesn't accommodate that high bandwidth communication that a team can have when they're co-located. Now, you can't always accommodate co-location of a team, but the best you can do to virtually create that environment where it's appearing to be co-located, you'll get better value out of that. And we actually have some exercises in the book that help demonstrate that as well.
Well, thanks for letting us come out and
Okay.
talk to you guys today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for the
All
opportunity.
right.